My aunt is an abuser. She did not respect my decisions and my life. When she helped me, all my plans fell apart, and the family openly started to hate her. Hi Reddit, I'm Lisa, 35, and I need some advice or at least some validation that I'm not crazy. I work as a senior graphic designer for a decent company. I love my job, my apartment, my cat Luna, and my quiet, mostly drama-free life. At least, that's what I thought until my Aunt Carol, the family's self-appointed fixer, decided to come for my neck at a family dinner. Carol is 62 and has always been the loudest voice at any gathering. You know the type. Overbearing, opinionated, and completely convinced she's the smartest person in any room. She loves to remind everyone how she single-handedly raised 3 kids and kept a marriage going for 40 years. For her, that's the gold standard of life success, and anyone who doesn't follow that script is just lost. It all started at one of our routine family dinners. My parents hosted these gatherings once a month, and though I usually dreaded them, I went because it made Mom happy. Carol was there, as always, taking up way too much space, both physically and with her opinions. "So, Lisa," she said, her voice dripping with condescension, "still doing the graphic design thing?" "Yep," I replied, forcing a smile. "Well, don't you think it's time to move on to something more stable? I mean, when are you going to grow up and get serious about life? Start thinking about settling down, maybe?" I felt my blood pressure spike, but kept calm. "I'm perfectly happy with my life, Carol." She let out one of those exaggerated sighs, shaking her head like I just told her I was dropping out of high school to join the circus. "You're wasting your potential, Lisa. You could have so much more. A husband, kids, a real future. But you're just sitting here, doing what exactly?" It was like this every single time. Carol had this way of making me feel like a rebellious teenager instead of a grown woman with a successful career. Normally, I'd brush it off and change the subject, but that night I was tired, stressed from a big deadline at work, and not in the mood to let her steamroll me. "I don't need a husband or kids to have a future," I said, sharper than I intended. "I have a career I love, financial independence, and freedom to live my life the way I want. Isn't that enough?" "Freedom," she scoffed. "Freedom to what? Sit in an empty apartment with a cat? You'll regret it, Lisa. One day you'll wake up and realize you wasted your best years chasing. What? Some fancy title at work? I could manage your life better than you do." That was it. The words were out before I even thought them through. "You know what, Carol? Let's test that theory. Let's see if you can actually do it." The room went silent. My dad stopped mid-chew, and my mom froze with her glass of wine halfway to her lips. Carol raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued. "What are you suggesting?" I wasn't entirely sure myself, but I couldn't back down now. "You think you know what's best for me? Fine. Let's switch places. For 1 month, you can call the shots. Make my decisions, manage my time, whatever. But if it doesn't work, if I'm miserable or if you can't handle it, then you admit you're wrong and leave me alone." I expected her to laugh it off or refuse, but instead, her eyes lit up like I just handed her a golden ticket. "Deal," she said, smirking. "This is going to be fun." And just like that, my quiet life turned into a full-blown reality show. The first week was surreal. Carol moved into my apartment, insisting that I stay with her at her house so she could oversee everything. It felt ridiculous, but I stuck to the deal. I handed over control of my calendar, my social life, even my dating apps, which she insisted I start using. "You need to put yourself out there," she said while scrolling through my profile like it was her personal project. "This is why you're single, Lisa. Your photos scream, career-focused loner. You need something warm, inviting, like, oh, a picture with a dog. Everyone loves dogs." "I don't have a dog," I reminded her. "Then borrow one. It's not that hard." She also decided I needed a wardrobe overhaul. Apparently, my collection of jeans, blazers, and graphic tees was too casual. One shopping trip later, I was the reluctant owner of several floral dresses, high heels I could barely walk in, and a purse that cost more than my monthly rent. Things escalated quickly when she set me up on a blind date with her friend's son, Darren. Darren was a 40-year-old financial planner with the personality of a damp sponge. The date was a disaster. He spent the entire evening talking about his golf swing and his 5-year plan, which apparently involved moving to Florida and starting a boat charter business. I couldn't even fake interest. Afterward, I told Carol the date had been a flop. She waved it off like it didn't matter. "It's not about the first date, Lisa. It's about building connections. Darren is stable, reliable, and comes from a good family. Give him a chance." By the end of the second week, I was already regretting this whole experiment. Carol had taken over every aspect of my life, from what I ate to where I went after work. She even convinced my boss to let me take on a new project that I had no interest in, claiming it would expand my horizons. It was a nightmare. But the real breaking point came when she decided to redecorate my apartment. I came home one evening to find my sleek, modern space transformed into something out of a 1980s sitcom. Floral curtains, pastel throw pillows, and a framed cross-stitch that said "Home Sweet Home" on the wall. My cat Luna was hiding under the couch, clearly traumatized. "What the hell, Carol?" I shouted. "It needed a woman's touch," she replied, completely unfazed. "Your apartment was so cold and uninviting. You'll thank me later." I was officially done, but the rules were clear. I had to give her a full month. So, I gritted my teeth, plastered on a fake smile, and counted down the days until I could take my life back. By the third week, things started to spiral out of control. Carol's meddling had alienated my coworkers, scared off a potential client, and nearly ruined my friendship with my best friend, Mia. Mia had come over one night to vent about her breakup, only for Carol to interrupt with unsolicited advice and a lecture on relationship maintenance. Mia left halfway through, texting me later to say she couldn't handle the Carol show. I couldn't either. But I had made a deal, and if there's one thing I hate more than Carol, it's admitting defeat. So, I stuck it out, hoping the experience would at least prove my point. By the end of the month, I was exhausted, frustrated, and more convinced than ever that Carol had no idea what she was talking about. She, of course, claimed victory, pointing out all the progress I'd made under her guidance. "You're more social, more polished, more well-rounded," she said during our final debrief. "You just needed a push in the right direction." But what she didn't see was how miserable I'd been the entire time. I missed my old life, my autonomy, my space, my ability to make decisions without someone breathing down my neck. Carol might think she'd won, but I knew the truth, and so did everyone else. The morning after Carol declared herself the master planner of my life, she was up at 6 a.m., sitting at my kitchen table with a notebook and a stack of printed articles. I walked in bleary-eyed, clutching my coffee, and she smiled at me like a drill sergeant ready to whip a recruit into shape. "Sit down," she said. "We've got work to do." She had outlined an entire life overhaul for me in bullet points. First on the list was my wardrobe. According to Carol, my sloppy style was holding me back from professional success and a stable relationship. Her solution was to drag me to some upscale boutique and spend an obscene amount of money on suits, dresses, and shoes that screamed, "I'm trying way too hard." The total bill? $5,000. $5,000. I nearly had a heart attack when I saw the receipt, but Carol waved it off as an investment in your future. When I showed up to a girls' night with my best friends wearing one of Carol's chosen outfits, a stiff gray suit with heels so high I wobbled like a newborn giraffe, they burst out laughing. "What is this?" Mia asked, trying and failing to suppress her giggles. "Did you rob a politician's closet?" chimed in Sophie, another friend. "It's Carol's idea," I muttered, red-faced. Their laughter turned to sympathetic groans. "Girl, you need to get out of this deal," Mia said, shaking her head. "This isn't you." But I couldn't. Not yet. Next up was my career. Carol was convinced my job as a senior graphic designer was a dead end. She rewrote my resume to make me sound like a corporate robot, tossing in every buzzword she could think of: synergy, paradigm shift, and even proven track record of success. I cringed as I read it, but she insisted it was exactly what employers wanted. She made me apply for jobs I had no interest in: project manager roles, sales positions, even a marketing job that required traveling 80% of the time. I went to 3 interviews and bombed all of them. At one, the hiring manager raised an eyebrow at my resume and asked if I'd copy-pasted it from a motivational poster. When I told Carol about the failed interviews, she dismissed it. "They don't know what they're missing. Keep going. We'll find something." While my wardrobe and career were being dismantled, Carol decided it was time for me to find a man. She made me sign up for a dating site and personally crafted my profile. It was full of cliches like, looking for a strong, stable man who knows what he wants. She even added a line about loving romantic walks on the beach, which was news to me since I hate sand. The matches started pouring in, but none of them were remotely compatible. One guy, Tim, was a cryptocurrency investor who spent the entire date lecturing me about blockchain. I barely got a word in edgewise, but when I mentioned I wasn't into crypto, he looked at me like I just insulted his religion. Another guy, Richard, turned out to be a hardcore traditionalist who expected me to quit my job and be a stay-at-home wife. He even asked if I could cook a 5-course meal. After every disastrous date, Carol would grill me for details, then brush off my concerns. "You're being too picky," she said. "No man is perfect." The worst part, though, was the MLM scheme. Carol's neighbor Sharon was a distributor for some pyramid-shaped health and wellness company, and she convinced Carol it was a great investment opportunity. Carol insisted I put $15,000 of my savings into it, promising I'd make it all back in no time. Against my better judgment, I caved, and soon I was the proud owner of 50 boxes of miracle supplements priced at $300 a pop. "Everyone loves these," Carol said confidently. "You'll sell out in a week." Spoiler alert, I didn't. I managed to sell 2 boxes, to Mia and Sophie, who only bought them out of pity. The rest sat in my apartment, gathering dust while Carol came up with increasingly absurd sales strategies. She even suggested I hold a health seminar at my workplace, which was met with a resounding no from HR. By the end of the 3rd week, I was hemorrhaging money and patience. My savings were nearly wiped out. My wardrobe was full of overpriced clothes I hated, and my dating life was a circus. I felt like I was living someone else's life, someone I didn't even like. But Carol wasn't done. One night, she announced that she had arranged for me to attend a networking event for high-achieving professionals. I was skeptical but went along with it, hoping it would at least be better than the MLM disaster. It wasn't. The event turned out to be a thinly veiled recruitment drive for yet another pyramid scheme, this time involving luxury travel packages. When I confronted Carol about it later, she shrugged. "You have to take risks to get rewards, Lisa. That's how successful people think." "Carol," I snapped, "this isn't risk. It's stupidity. I've lost money, embarrassed myself, and ruined my reputation at work. What part of this screams success to you?" She looked genuinely surprised. "I'm trying to help you, Lisa. You've been stuck in the same rut for years, and I just want you to see there's more out there." But it wasn't more. It was chaos. My life had turned into a series of bad decisions and worse consequences, all because I let her take control. I felt like I was suffocating, and for what? To prove a point? To make her back off? By the 4th week, I was at my breaking point. Carol's plan had left me broke, humiliated, and exhausted. My friends were worried about me, my co-workers avoided me, and even my cat seemed annoyed by the constant upheaval. But Carol? She was thriving. She walked around like a queen, convinced she'd turned my life around. I knew I had to end this experiment, but the thought of admitting defeat made me sick. I had 1 week left. 1 week to survive this madness and reclaim my life. By the time the month-long experiment was coming to an end, I wasn't just miserable, I was furious. Carol's so-called guidance hadn't just wrecked my life. It had caused ripples of chaos for everyone around me. The breaking point came when Mia, my best friend, confronted me after work one day. "Lisa, we need to talk," she said, her tone unusually serious. She pushed her phone toward me, showing a string of texts from an unknown number. The messages were painfully familiar, patronizing advice about relationships, career moves, and unsolicited critiques of her lifestyle. "Is this Carol?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "She's been texting me non-stop since that dinner you invited her to," Mia said, her voice tight. "She even suggested I sign up for that MLM scam you got roped into." "Lisa, this has to stop." I apologized profusely, promising to handle it. Mia wasn't the only one Carol had meddled with. My younger cousin Emily, a college sophomore, called me in tears, saying Carol had convinced her to switch her major from art history to business. Carol had told her, "There's no future in painting pretty pictures." Emily had dropped her art classes, but now she was failing statistics and regretting everything. And then there was my brother, Jake. Carol had offered him financial advice, which boiled down to guilt-tripping him into investing in some shady property deal she'd heard about through a friend. He'd lost $10,000 and was furious when he found out the so-called friend was one of Carol's old high school acquaintances with a track record of bad business ventures. At this point, it wasn't just about me anymore. Carol's meddling had hurt everyone in her path, and it was time to put an end to it. I started gathering evidence, screenshots of text messages, emails, and even a few voice recordings of her making wild promises and giving terrible advice. I also collected stories from my relatives, who were more than willing to share their grievances once they realized they weren't alone. The perfect opportunity came at the next family dinner. I showed up early, armed with my laptop, a USB stick, and a folder full of printed documents. The tension in the air was palpable as everyone arrived, one by one, exchanging knowing glances. By the time Carol walked in, looking smug and self-satisfied, the stage was set. Dinner started off as usual, with Carol dominating the conversation. She was midway through bragging about how she'd turned Lisa's life around when I decided to strike. "Actually, Carol," I said, my voice steady but loud enough to silence the room, "I think it's time we talk about the results of your little project." She looked surprised but intrigued. "Oh, what do you mean?" I pulled out my laptop and connected it to the TV in the living room. "I've been documenting everything. The wardrobe changes, the MLM scam, the disastrous dates, the failed interviews, everything." I opened a folder labeled Carol's Greatest Hits and began presenting. First up were the screenshots of our conversations about the MLM scheme, followed by photos of the unsold boxes stacked in my closet. The family murmured in shock as I showed the receipts and the loss of $15,000. Next, I played a voice recording of Carol berating Emily for wanting to pursue art. Emily, sitting quietly in the corner, burst into tears as the room erupted in outrage. My mom, who had always been Carol's biggest defender, finally spoke up. "Carol, how could you say that to her?" Mom's voice trembled with a mix of anger and disbelief. "You crushed her dreams." Carol tried to defend herself, saying she was only trying to be practical, but I didn't let her off the hook. I moved on to Jake's story, displaying the emails Carol had forwarded about the shady property deal. Jake stood up, his face red with anger. "You cost me 10 grand, Carol. 10 grand. Do you have any idea how hard I worked for that money?" Carol's composure was starting to crack. She stammered something about taking risks, but the family wasn't buying it. I wrapped up my presentation with a slide titled Collateral Damage, listing all the ways Carol's interference had hurt not just me, but everyone around her. Mia and Sophie, who had joined the dinner at my invitation, spoke up about their own experiences. Mia recounted the texts and unsolicited advice, while Sophie revealed that Carol had tried to set her up with a divorced man in his 50s who had 3 kids and a reputation for being controlling. The final blow came when my dad, who rarely got involved in family drama, stood up and said, "Carol, enough is enough. You've crossed every line imaginable. This family doesn't need your interference anymore." The room fell silent as everyone waited for Carol's response. She looked around, her face pale, and for the first time, she seemed genuinely at a loss for words. But instead of apologizing, she lashed out. "I was only trying to help," she yelled. "You're all so ungrateful. All I've ever done is try to make your lives better, and this is how you repay me." "Better?" I shot back, my voice shaking with anger. "You've made my life a living hell for the past month. You've cost us money, time, and peace of mind. This isn't help, Carol. It's control." My mom nodded, tears in her eyes. "Lisa's right. You've always acted like you know what's best for everyone, but you don't. And it's time you stopped." One by one, the rest of the family chimed in, recounting their own stories of Carol's overreach. Even my usually quiet Uncle Mark spoke up, saying Carol had once tried to help his marriage by telling his wife he was too passive, nearly causing a rift between them. By the end of the night, Carol's authority as the family matriarch was in shambles. She stormed out, slamming the door behind her, but not before muttering something about how we'd all regret this. The rest of us stayed behind, decompressing and sharing a rare moment of unity. It felt like a weight had been lifted. For the first time in years, I felt free to live my life on my own terms, without Carol's shadow looming over me. And judging by the relieved faces around the table, I wasn't the only one. The fallout from that family dinner hit Carol harder than I expected. She stopped speaking to me for a couple of weeks, which honestly felt like a gift. The family group chats were eerily quiet without her constant stream of unsolicited advice and articles about improving your life. But I knew Carol wouldn't stay quiet for long. She thrived on control and attention, and she'd find a way to claw both back. Sure enough, the first sign of her comeback was a gold embossed invitation that arrived at my apartment one Thursday evening. The envelope was thick and expensive, like something you'd expect from a high-end wedding. Inside was an invitation to a family appreciation dinner hosted by none other than Carol. The event was set to take place at one of the city's most upscale restaurants, the kind of place where appetizers cost more than my weekly grocery bill. I immediately texted my mom, who confirmed she'd received the same invite. "What's she up to now?" I asked, already suspicious. Mom replied with a shrug emoji and a simple, "Guess we'll find out." The dinner was scheduled for Saturday night, and curiosity got the better of me. I decided to go, mostly to see what kind of spectacle Carol had cooked up. When I arrived at the restaurant, I wasn't disappointed. She'd rented out the entire private dining room, complete with chandeliers, floral centerpieces, and a live string quartet. It looked like something out of a movie, and I couldn't help but wonder how much this was costing her. As the family trickled in, the tension was palpable. Everyone exchanged wary glances, clearly waiting for the other shoe to drop. Carol greeted each person with an exaggerated smile and air kisses, acting like the last family dinner hadn't ended in her public humiliation. Once everyone was seated, she stood at the head of the table, clinking her glass for attention. "Thank you all for coming," she began, her tone dripping with faux sincerity. "I know things have been tense lately, but I wanted to remind you all of the importance of family. And what better way to do that than by treating you to an evening of good food and good company?" The first course was served, and for a brief moment, it seemed like Carol might actually keep things civil. But halfway through the meal, she launched into a speech that made it clear this wasn't about reconciliation. It was about damage control. "I've always tried to do what's best for this family," she said, looking around the table with a practiced expression of martyrdom. "Sometimes my efforts are misunderstood, but everything I do comes from a place of love." Jake, my brother, snorted into his wine glass, earning a glare from Carol. Ignoring him, she pressed on. "I know I've made mistakes, but I believe we can move past them. And to show how serious I am about mending relationships, I've decided to make some investments in our family's future." At this, she gestured to a waiter, who brought out a stack of glossy brochures. Carol handed them out like party favors, and as I flipped through mine, my stomach sank. It was a pitch for yet another MLM scheme, this time involving luxury lifestyle experiences. She was trying to rope us into selling overpriced vacation packages. The room erupted into chaos. Jake stood up, waving his brochure in the air. "Are you kidding me, Carol? You think you can buy us off with a fancy dinner and then drag us into another one of your scams?" Carol's face hardened. "It's not a scam, Jake. It's a legitimate business opportunity. If you'd just open your mind—" "No," I interrupted, my voice firm. "We're not doing this again. You've already cost this family enough." The rest of the night was a blur of arguments and accusations. By the time dessert was served, half the family had left in frustration, and the rest were barely speaking to Carol. She looked shaken but still defiant, refusing to admit she'd done anything wrong. 2 days later, Carol showed up at my apartment unannounced. She was uncharacteristically subdued, holding a large envelope. "Lisa," she began, "I want to make amends." I raised an eyebrow, skeptical. "How?" She handed me the envelope. Inside was a check for $30,000. "This is for you," she said, "to make up for the MLM investment and everything else. All I ask is that you publicly support me. Tell the family you've forgiven me, that I was right to help you." I stared at her, stunned. "You want me to sell my integrity for 30 grand? It's not like that," she insisted. "This is about unity. The family listens to you, Lisa. If you stand with me, they'll come around." I handed the check back without hesitation. "No, Carol, I won't do it." Her face twisted with anger. "You're making a mistake. You think you're better than me, but you'll see. You'll regret this." She stormed out, leaving me shaken but resolute. A week later, I found out she'd taken things a step further. She was suing me for defamation. She claimed my smear campaign at the family dinner had damaged her reputation and caused emotional distress. The case was laughable, but it still required time, money, and energy to fight. The lawsuit dragged on for months, during which Carol's behavior became increasingly erratic. She tried to rally other family members to her side, but no one was willing to support her after everything that had happened. In court, her case fell apart when I presented the evidence I'd collected: screenshots, emails, and testimonies from relatives who had been harmed by her actions. The judge dismissed the case, and Carol's credibility was in tatters. Word of the lawsuit spread through the extended family, and even those who had once defended her turned their backs on her. She became a pariah, ostracized from family gatherings and group chats. In the end, Carol's desperate attempts to regain control only solidified her downfall. She moved out of state shortly after the lawsuit, cutting off contact with most of the family. The lavish dinner, the check, the lawsuit, it had all been for nothing. And while a part of me felt sorry for her, I couldn't ignore the relief that came with her absence. For the first time in years, the family felt like a family again, free from the constant drama and manipulation. And for the first time in my adult life, I felt like I could truly breathe. Carol had tried to take control of my life, but in the end, I took it back, and I wasn't giving it up for anything. The months following Carol's departure were surreal. For the first time in years, the family was free from her grip. It felt like someone had lifted a heavy, suffocating blanket off all of us, and we could finally breathe. But I wasn't out of the woods yet. Carol had left a trail of chaos in her wake, and I had to pick up the pieces of my life. My first priority was rebuilding my finances. The $15,000 I'd sunk into that ridiculous NLM scheme had been a brutal loss, and the legal fees from Carol's defamation lawsuit had drained the rest of my savings. I decided to go back to freelancing. Before Carol's intervention, I'd done freelance graphic design on the side, and I realized it was my best shot at regaining some financial stability. The first few weeks were tough. I spent hours updating my portfolio, reaching out to old clients, and scouring freelance platforms for gigs. It was slow going at first, but gradually, the work started to trickle in. I took on everything from logo design to website layouts, sometimes working 14-hour days to make ends meet. It was exhausting, but it was mine. My work, my choices, my life. Around this time, I also started a side project that had been brewing in the back of my mind for years. I'd always wanted to create something personal, something that told my story. The chaos with Carol had given me plenty of material, so I started sketching ideas for a graphic novel about personal growth and resilience. It wasn't just a creative outlet, it was therapy. Every panel I drew felt like a small step toward reclaiming my narrative. The family dynamic shifted dramatically after Carol's exit. Without her dominating every conversation, the atmosphere at gatherings became lighter, more relaxed. My cousin Emily, who had returned to her art history major, started bringing her sketches to family dinners, and we'd sit together after dessert, swapping ideas and critiquing each other's work. Jake, still stinging from his financial loss, began taking financial literacy courses and shared what he learned with the rest of us. Even my mom, who had always been hesitant to speak out against Carol, seemed more confident and outspoken. One night, during one of our newly peaceful family dinners, my Uncle Mark raised his glass and said, "Here's to a Carol-free life." The table erupted in laughter and clinking glasses, and for the first time in years, I felt a deep sense of belonging. Of course, Carol wasn't about to disappear quietly. Even from a distance, she couldn't resist trying to stir the pot. She started spreading rumors, claiming there had been a conspiracy against her orchestrated by me. According to her, I'd manipulated the family into turning against her because I was jealous of her wisdom and experience. She even went as far as creating a blog where she chronicled her version of events, painting herself as a misunderstood savior. At first, I was furious. The lies, the audacity. It was all so infuriating. But then I realized something. No one was listening. The family had seen the truth firsthand, and they weren't buying Carol's narrative. Even her old friends and acquaintances seemed to be distancing themselves. Mia, who kept tabs on Carol's blog for amusement, told me it had fewer than 10 subscribers. "She's shouting into the void," Mia said with a smirk. "Let her. No one cares." That was the moment I decided to let it go. Carol could scream conspiracy until she was blue in the face, but it didn't matter. She no longer had the power to control me or anyone else. As my finances stabilized, I started to invest more time into my graphic novel. I called it The Long Shadow, a story about a woman breaking free from the manipulations of a controlling figure and rediscovering her sense of self. It was deeply personal, and putting it together was both cathartic and terrifying. What if no one liked it? What if it flopped? To my surprise, when I started sharing snippets of it online, the response was overwhelmingly positive. People related to the story in ways I hadn't expected. Messages poured in from strangers thanking me for telling a story that mirrored their own experiences. Some had dealt with controlling parents, others with toxic partners, but the common thread was the struggle to reclaim their lives. By the time I finished the first draft, I'd secured a small publishing deal with an independent press. The day I held the first printed copy of The Long Shadow in my hands, I felt a surge of pride I hadn't felt in years. It wasn't just a book. It was proof that I'd come out the other side stronger. The family celebrated the book's release with a casual dinner at my parents' house, a far cry from Carol's over-the-top gatherings. As we sat around the table, laughing and reminiscing, I realized how much things had changed. The family felt more cohesive, more supportive. Without Carol's divisive influence, we were finally able to connect in a genuine way. Even my relationship with my mom, which had always been a bit strained, improved. She admitted she'd been afraid to stand up to Carol for years, worried about rocking the boat. "But you showed me it's okay to set boundaries," she said, giving me a rare hug. "I'm proud of you, Lisa." As for Carol, she remained a distant, bitter figure on the fringes of our lives. Occasionally, someone would mention seeing her in town, but no one reached out. She became a cautionary tale, a reminder of what happens when control and ego take precedence over love and respect.